Welcome everyone to our 57th Alumni Chapel. We're delighted to be here and glad to have you all with us. It's my pleasure now to introduce our All-Star NHL goalie, Stanley Cup winner, worldwide HMI goalie instructor, color commentator, husband to Diane, father to Holly, who is married to Corey, grandpa to Rosie, Glenn Chico Resch. And Glenn, I'm going to ask you to introduce your panel today.
Well, thank you, Donnie. I appreciate that. But before we get to our special guests, I just wanted to say to everyone and tell them what we're going to talk about today, what the topic's about. As we all know, the first step in a spiritual journey is always reaching out to Jesus. We saw it on the cross. The first one to do that was the thief on the cross. It can be instantaneous. Sometimes it takes a while, but it's that moment when we just say, Lord, I want you to come into my life. I want you to be the center of my life, and I will follow you the best I can. And that's always the first step. But I find it's step 2 and 3 sometimes that is the most difficult. Step 2 is you've said you've committed your life to Christ and you're kind of doing it, but it's more on the QT. Then all of a sudden, something happens where it's crunch time. Jesus say, okay, you're seeing I'm the center of your life. Here's a chance for you to voice it, to show it, to explain it, whatever it is. And that's what we want to talk about, because I think that's the moment where the real burn in our hearts, our real desire to follow Jesus takes place. So that's going to be the first thing we're going to talk about. And then, of course, the second thing is, how do we keep that first love? We all remember that first love when Jesus revealed himself and we said, wow, I can't believe this. This is so special. Now, how do we keep that burning through the rest of our lives? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I've recruited a couple of dandy guys who have lived this. And so they'll be speaking from experience. Our first guest is going to be Garry Unger. Garry was raised in a Christian home in Alberta, very close to his mom and dad, and the Christian faith was always part of his life. In terms of what Garry did for a living, he was a terrific hockey player in the NHL for 16 years, and he says one of his memorable years was the year he scored 42 goals, and the only player to score more, Phil Esposito, scored 43. So we will talk to Garry in a moment after I introduce our second guest, which is Michel Dion. And Michel, 4 years in the world hockey, 6 in the NHL, but you don't have to talk to him very long to realize the most memorable moment in his life was in Quebec City when he accepted the invitation to come to an HMI camp and really first heard about Jesus. And those are our two guests today. And I want to start with you, Garry. But can you just talk about some of the moments where you were challenged and tested to reveal that faith and how that proceeded in your life?
So early on in my life, you mentioned I grew up in a Christian home. I was raised in Edmonton. My mom and dad were, we went to the Nazarene church, and it's amazing the learning experience that you have through that, even if you hadn't made a commitment, or even if you fall away from being committed, it's always in you. There's something there until that point comes where, for me, it was in 1980 when I went to a Christian Athletes Convention in Phoenix. I got traded to Atlanta. Paul Henderson and John Pronovo were on the team. I was going through some struggles with my marriage and all this different thing. And the reason I went to Atlanta and the reason I left St. Louis was I figured that I needed to win a Stanley Cup. And everybody's searching for something. And I had all this stuff. You accumulate things that you want to as a kid. You want to first of all be in the league, and then you want to play a little bit, and then you want to be on the power play, and all the things that happen in the game. And, but I looked around and I love St. Louis. I'm living on a 200-acre farm. I raised quarter horses and motorcycles, and I was doing stuff that I loved to do my whole life. And there was something missing. There was something missing in my life. And I'm thinking, it's got to be a Stanley Cup. It's got to be. So I ended up getting traded to Atlanta, and they had a pretty solid team, I thought, at the time. And when I went there, was one of the guys that I knew from St. Louis. And he came to me and he said, listen, we've got a little bit of trouble on our team. We've got some Christian guys. And all of a sudden it clicked to me. Oh, I think I'm a Christian. So that's how it kind of started. And I thought there was kind of a little bit of a divide. And I was hanging around with the Christian guys, and on one day, and the next day I was hanging around with the other guys, and I'm thinking, these Christian guys are really, really neat guys. I mean, they've got joy in their life. There's something different about these guys that these other guys don't have. So they invited me to go to a Bible study, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to do that. But I was traveling and hanging around with these guys on the road. And the more I hung around with them, the more, and it wasn't what they were talking about. You know, we might be the only Bible that somebody reads. And it was their actions. It was the way they were handling themselves. It was the way they were treating their wives. So as the season went on, we ended up playing in Vancouver, and the question kept coming up in the media. What's the problem, and what's this thing about the Christian guys? So they interviewed me in between periods. And the guy said, well, I heard you're having trouble with these Christian guys. And I said, you know, I'm a Christian. I said, I haven't, at that point, I hadn't made that total commitment again from my childhood. But I couldn't get on television and not protect my parents, and I knew my mom and dad were watching and all that stuff. So at that point, I went back to Atlanta, and I said, okay, I'm going to go to a Bible study. And when I went to the Bible study, it was totally different than I thought. You know, it was great people and having coffee and donuts and talking about the Bible. So as the season went on, my wife didn't travel with me that year. She stayed in St. Louis because she was having trouble. She had a couple of miscarriages and she was pregnant again. So at the end of the season, I called Bev and I said, listen, there's a Christian Athletes Convention in Phoenix, and we need to go. And she said, well, I don't know. She said, I know we need to do something with our marriage, but whether it's that radical or not. And I said, well, listen, I've been spending time with these guys and they're pretty normal. She said, well, I'm not going to Phoenix if we can't go to Florida. We go to Florida after the season every year. I said, well, we can go to Florida. I said, somehow we can work it out. There was also that year, there was in Toronto, there was a show called Superstars, and they had a bunch of athletes come in. Gordy was there and Gretzky was there. I think Gretzky was only maybe 18 or 19 years old. So I said, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll go to Superstars, and then we'll fly to Florida, and then we'll go to the convention. So anyhow, that's what happened, and that's how I got her to go. We got to the meeting. Darcy Rhoda was with me, and we sat down the night before. We went into Phoenix and got all our paperwork and books and everything, and we're having supper, and we looked at all the and I know you were there at the time. I think it was 1980. Anyhow, we looked at all these meetings, and we were going to Florida. They said you only had to go to one meeting, and then you could sit by the pool. And I said, I can spend 15 minutes in school without looking out the window trying to get on my scooter and go do something else. I said, I can't go to these meetings all day long. I said, this is crazy. So we decided in the morning, Darcy and I and Bev, we decided that we would get up in the morning and have breakfast and go to the first meeting. And then we'd go sit by the pool. So that's what we did. So we got up, and the first guy that was speaking was a guy named Garry, and he was a marriage guy. And he's speaking on camping with your family, but he's lining everything up with scripture. And all of a sudden, it was like there was nobody else in the room. It was like he was talking right to me. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy is amazing what he's saying. I said, so we never missed a meeting. We went back to the room, and I said to Bev, what did you think about the day? And she said, you know, we've been searching for something that's going to put our marriage together again. She said, we need to make a commitment. And I said, you're right. And we made a commitment to each other and to Christ, and never missed a meeting at that PLA conference. I mean, it was amazing for me. And all of a sudden, I realized that void that everybody has. There's a void in our lives that can only be filled with the love of Jesus Christ. If it's filled with hockey and money and cars and horses and motorcycles and all the stuff that you dream about, you never get enough. It's the same with drugs and drinking, and you never get enough. You can't fill it. You're always trying to get more. And when that moment came, when we invited Christ to come into our lives, that changed. All of a sudden, the fulfillment was there. And there was a different love that I had for her. There was a different love that I had for God. And everything that my parents were teaching me, everything went back in my mind about when I was a boy going to church in Calgary, and the things that they were teaching there came back, and it healed our marriage. And that was what I was looking for. It wasn't a Stanley Cup. It wasn't all these other things. It was a personal relationship with Jesus Christ that changed my life.
Garry, that is beautiful testimony. I can't thank you enough. That is so what our lives in the gospel is about. You were challenged, Bev was challenged, and you stood up for Jesus, and I know you've been living for him ever since. And we thank you. That was just awesome. I mean, it just melts my heart. So thank you, Garry, and that was beautiful. And Michel, I know, Michel, after that glorious day in Quebec City, you had many challenges, Michel. And can you just tell us again how God has kind of worked in your life and how you've had to sort of step up for your faith at different times?
Well, I gave my life to Christ in 1979 because I didn't like the person I was. I didn't like that I was emotional. and not sticking to logic enough. I always stuck to teammates who were very logical to keep me straight. And I knew there was something wrong with me, and I didn't like the person I was. So I gave my life to Christ at 79, but I didn't fall in love with him until 1982. And here's what happened for me to fall in love with him is anybody can do things well when things are going great. The circumstances take care of that. But it's second chances when you're down and out and you've tried everything and you can't do anything about anything and you're down in the dumps. You can't get yourself back up, and neither can anybody else. And that's what happened to me. The first one was in Quebec City. You know, I had a bipolar moment. Dad was bipolar, alcoholic, domestic violence. We grew up through a lot of crap. And I'm in the middle of a game against Boston. I think Al was playing that night, and John Paddock was on my side. And never liked people very much. Human nature turned me off. I'd been a Christian maybe a year, and we're in the middle of the second period. I missed a shot from the point clear. So the score's 4-1, and people are booing the heck out of me. And I said, you know what? I don't think I like this anymore. I don't like them, and I'm going home. So I don't know. It's just one of those things that happened. I went through the bench. Michel was the coach. He says, it's pretty bad what you're doing now. So I don't care. What do I care about you guys? So I went to a dressing room. I got undressed, got in the shower, and then it hit me. I said, what the heck did you do? You just threw your whole career away. And I prayed, Lord, you know, please save my career. I abandoned my teammates, which haunts me to this day. And I don't deserve a second chance. But please give me that second chance if you want. If not, I'll pay the price. I'm the one that did this. Long story short, after going down to the minors, getting sold to Winnipeg for the rest of the year, becoming a free agent in the summer, signing with the Pittsburgh Penguins that year, 14 months after I walked off the ice in December 1980, I started the All-Star game in 1982 in Washington. I always remember this Quebec reporter came to me and said, what happened? I mean, you should have been out of a job, out of a career 14 months ago. You walk off the ice and then you start the All-Star game 14 months later. I said, well, that night, you remember you were there, you wrote about it, and you were kind to me. I said, that's all right. I said, I got in the shower and I said, Jesus, please save my career. I just blew it. And that's his answer. I started the All-Star game tonight. It's not only saved my career, put me in the All-Star game. The second one, I call them mini resurrections. People call them new beginnings, second chances. I like to give the glory to God. There are many resurrections inside our lives until the big resurrection comes. The second resurrection was 10 years later in 92. Basically, I had lost everything. I had gone through a painful divorce. Out of this, I lost my career. Pittsburgh bought me out. Investments started falling apart. I didn't have anything left. And Dad died all at about the same time, within a year and a half. And I was living out of a van. I was homeless. I said, well, Lord, you've helped me before when I was down and out, but this is a new level. Can you please restore me? Because I've got to start all over again with nothing, and I'm 37. I don't want to do it. I don't feel like it, and I'm going to need your strength to do this. So, and then long story short with that too, he led me to a lady, her name was Kelsey Thompson Dion. She was 14 years younger than me. Had grown up in church ever since she was 6 years old. And as badly as I'd messed up in that particular area of my life, that was God's answer to my prayer to restart my life. He gave me a pure, wonderful woman when I deserved nothing but the exact opposite. And that was another second chance. So that's when I fell in love with Jesus, because he gave me a power to do what nobody could do, including myself. And I didn't know where that strength came from, except he was the only logical explanation. So, but that's when I fell in love with Jesus Christ.
Michel, thank you. I know for a fact, right? Excuse me, I might get emotional, but I know right now, God listening to you and Garry is saying to Jesus, you see why I sent you to earth? It's for guys like this. And that's just, that's so inspiring. Thank you, Michel. And then just to finish up, I can tell from both of your voices, your first love is still Jesus. That's what we all want to maintain until we take our last breath. And Garry, I know you could go on and on, but what's just one or two things that you have done since that moment in 1980 that have kept you and Bev's fire burning in your heart for Jesus?
Well, one of the things that I got the opportunity to do when I retired from playing, I retired in '83. I never won a Stanley Cup, but I was on the Edmonton Oilers and did the television work for them in '84. I was living in Edmonton, stayed in Edmonton, doing some little things around town, and all the excitement that goes on with the Stanley Cup lasts for about 3 days. All the different parties, different things, and all of a sudden you go back to the rink and everybody's putting their equipment away, and they're saying, "Well, is that it? You know, I've lived my whole life for a Stanley Cup, and this is it. But this it's got to be more." That same year, I got a call from a guy in Dundee, Scotland, and he said, we've got a team in the UK. Would you be interested in coming over and being a player coach? And I said, well, I've got 3 girls in school, and I've never thought about moving to Scotland. And it turned out that it worked out. Bev stayed at home. I spent that year in Scotland. My wife flew back and forth. I had 3 girls at the time. And at the end of the season, we had a trip to Greece. We went to a little island called Kos. And we were sitting, Bev had come over, and we were sitting at the restaurant on the Mediterranean. And we started talking about the conference. And I said, Bev, I've asked God to forgive me. I spent that whole year reading on forgiveness. And we made a commitment to Christ, and everything is going to be better. And I still have some things that need to be straightened around. I said, I've asked God for forgiveness, but I haven't asked you. I said, I put you through so much stuff. The father that I was, your whole life is hockey. Keep the baby quiet in the afternoon because I've got a game tonight, and I've got to rest, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And it's all about me. It's all about the athlete. And I said, I have to ask you for forgiveness. And we sat there. We spent a week there, and we went over all the different things that happened during our career, and some of the things that we did on the road, and different things like that. And was in 1985. So that was 5 years after we made our commitment, but that's when our marriage was really healed. And if God hadn't been in it, if we hadn't been Christians at the time, we would have killed each other, probably. And it was just that those opportunities to allow God to read into your heart about how can I be better? How can I be the kind of guy that somebody meets and they say, like I said about Paul Henderson and John Pronovo, something different about this guy. There's something different. And at that point, people are willing to listen to you. We're never going to talk anybody into being a Christian. We're never going to argue anybody to read the Bible. Or, nobody's going to argue with me and say, well, you have to go to that Bible study. I had to come to a point where I wanted to go to the Bible study. And when Christ becomes a major part of your life, that's what you're thinking about all the time. That's what you're waking up in the morning and you're thinking, wow, am I ever lucky to be alive, to have this family, to be able to have these kids, and all these different things that are going on. And all of a sudden, the things that were important to me as a young boy about playing and moving on with my life, it made sense. So that opportunity to be able to do that with my wife, had that not have happened, had I not done that, it wouldn't have been fulfilled. So God deals with everybody at a certain way, and we just continued to have God number one in our marriage, have God number one, and still, everybody on here is married. That's the toughest thing that I've ever done. Forget about hockey, forget about brawls, forget about bench clearings, being married is the toughest thing that I've ever done. And when I cleaned that up, I realized God was real. I realized, Jesus is the main part of my life.
Well, Garry, again, beautiful. And I will say, I know Bev just a little, but you have been given many great gifts in your life, and many of us can identify with this. But Bev was just an incredible gift from God, and I know you know that. And I think what you're saying for all of us, if we want to finish strong, we want to have a purpose in our life. And I think that's what you're saying, Garry. Be conscious each day that people will maybe look at you, be looking to have their spirits lifted, and you can be Christ-like in those situations. And I know you've done that, Garry. Thank you very much. You've been so insightful and so helpful. And give Bev a big hug from all of us. And hopefully you'll get some ice to keep her nice and cool. Thank you, Garry.
Thanks, Chico.
You're welcome. And Michel, a couple of final words of wisdom from you, my friend.
Well, threefold motivation to stay fueled in Christ. Number one, spiritual pleasure, especially when I pray scripture. You've all heard of the verse, taste and see that the Lord is good. Tasting the Lord spiritually is a joy that all his blessings put together on earth cannot come close to. And some of you guys that have experienced that know what it's all about. It's the kind of spiritual pleasure you say, Lord, I want to stay right here. I don't want to get up and go live the day out. I want to stay here all day and just feel you, sense you. Number two, continual changes, not only in the people that I know, but in myself, seeing that the person that I was in my 20s as a young, selfish, cocky athlete, seeking life for himself, to what the Lord's done the last 44 years is a proof that if he can change my heart and the heart of many of my teammates or friends that I know like that, this is a power stronger than anything. And number three is that Christ said it best when he says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. why do we endure this crazy, sick world we live in today? But it's for the joy that's lying ahead of us. It's future. It's an eternal glory with him and with each other. And the verses that sum that up best for me is in Psalm 73, verses 25, 6, and 28. And I'll read them to you guys. And basically, it's a trade. It's a few decades here on earth for an eternity in heaven. I mean, a no-brainer, right? But here's what it says, verse 25, 26, 28, Psalm 73. Whom do I have in heaven but you? And besides you, I desire nothing on earth. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. As for me, it is good for me to be near God. I've made the sovereign Lord my refuge, and I will tell all your deeds. So giving him a pleasure and putting a smile on his face and looking forward to hearing the words, well done, good and faithful servant, is what I'm looking for. Yes, keep me fueled. And that's what I want to live the rest of my life for and make up for all the lost time in the past before I was as kid.
Michel, thank you, Michel. That is so helpful. And Michel, anyone who meets you is first struck with your enthusiasm. But as we've gotten to know you over the years, and anyone who gets to know you, that enthusiasm and joy that you have for the Lord, trust me, is so inspiring. And the fact that you were able to capsulize it and give it to us listeners today, and just live your life the way Christ would want you to do it. I just can't thank you enough so thank you, Garry, and thank you, Michel, for those inspiring words today.